OK, let's get more on that news from Australia now with our business editor, Stephen Carroll, who's with me here in the studio. Stephen, what sort of state is the Australia media market in at the current time?
It's been a terrible few years for the Australian media, and that's what's led the government to introduce this code, which has led to the steps being taken by Facebook. There's an initiative that's been tracking what's been happening to newsrooms in Australia. It's called the Public Interest Journalism Initiative, and they say that since January 2019, 120 newsrooms have shut down in Australia. Now, some of that is consolidation, newsrooms being grouped together, and some of it is titles being closed down. The tracking project says the decline is due to a triple whammy of effects: the impact of digital platforms on advertising, the coronavirus pandemic, and even the bushfires having an effect on the media as well. Media ownership in Australia is generally concentrated in a few small number of large groups. One of the biggest is Rupert Murdoch's News Corp. Their financial results don't tell us an awful lot about the impact, though, of the advertising slump, because it's a global company, so it's more of a broad-based picture that they paint. But if we look at two of the other big players in the Australian market, Seven West Media, which owns the 7 TV channels and newspapers like the West Australian, saw its revenues fall by 14% in the last financial year. Nine Entertainment, which owns titles including the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, they saw their revenues fall by 7%.
And Stephen, just how much of that is to do with the impact of digital platforms on the ad market?
This is what the Australian government was trying to tackle, and Australia's Competition Authority, in drawing up the guidelines that led to that code, broke down how digital advertising money is spread out in Australia. For every $100 of digital advertising, Google gets $53, Facebook $28, and the others are left to split $19 between them. Now, some of the digital giants have been tackling this in different ways. Google, for example, has been signing partnership deals with media companies in Australia. This is happening elsewhere in the world as well, I should say, which is going to pay them for participating in Google's News Showcase product, a way of spotlighting news articles. According to estimates by JP Morgan, Seven West, one of the big Australian media groups, could get 40 to 70 million Australian dollars a year under that deal with Google, whereas Nine's deal with Google is reported to be worth around $30 million a year.
OK, well, staying with the business news, to some more news of job cuts and big losses at Air France KLM.
6,000 more jobs are to go in the coming years at the Franco-Dutch airline as it counts the cost of the pandemic. That's on top of the more than 8,000 jobs the company cut in 2020, the equivalent of 10% of its global workforce. Air France KLM saw losses of €7.1 billion last year. That's after its passenger numbers fell by almost 4/5. The company says it's only operating at 40% capacity in the first 3 months of this year.
Now, Stephen, another company that had a very bad year in 2020 is Airbus.
The aerospace giant says this is the most severe crisis that's faced the industry. Airbus saw net losses of €1.1 billion last year. Revenues fell by almost a third to just under 50 billion. The number of planes that Airbus delivered to its customers also plunged by a third. The company says it expects to produce a similar number in 2021.
Now, Stephen, how is that news going down on the markets?
Airbus investors not impressed with the results out of that company. Shares down around 4% at the open in Paris. Possibly the forecast for 2021 of no recovery having an impact on what's happening on Airbus shares. Air France shares down by around 0.5% at the open as well. More broadly on the European markets, shares opening pretty flat. London and Paris nudging into the red. Frankfurt, though, seeing slight gains at the open. And on the Asian markets, the Nikkei in Tokyo finishing the day down slightly, but there were gains in Shanghai as it reopened after the Lunar New Year break.
Stephen, to a business now that's booming during the pandemic.
There are some companies that are seeing benefits of what's been happening. Safety protocols have meant that many care and business environments need to expand their space quickly. That's led to a huge increase in demand for prefabricated building units. Manufacturers are even overhauling their businesses as a result. Yuka Roye has the story.
They are a staple at construction sites, but now use of these prefabricated modules is expanding rapidly in schools, in hospitals, and at new vaccination centres. At this factory in eastern France, run by a leading prefab manufacturer, output is 30% higher than in normal times. Speed is of the essence.
Une salle de classe de 4-5 modules peut sortir en une journée sans aucun problème. C'est des clients qui cherchent surtout à avoir une réponse rapide, flexible et répondre aux contraintes sanitaires qu'on a actuellement.
Cost is another advantage. A 50 square metre classroom is sold for about €50,000, 30% cheaper than a permanent structure. While the coronavirus crisis has boosted business for this company, it has forced others to innovate. This firm near Dijon usually makes exhibition stands, but now it has switched to making a new product it invented.
C'est une porte qui est livrée prémontée, une barre télescopique qui est réglable en largeur.
An easy and flexible way to create a barrier at €1,200 apiece, the mobile door has been sold to almost 300 retirement homes across France. Thanks to the new orders, 6 employees have been able to return to work from furlough. For the manufacturer, however, just having new ideas isn't enough.
La difficulté, c'est de pouvoir retrouver les bons interlocuteurs, que ce soit dans les EHPAD, dans les hôpitaux et dans les cliniques.
The company is trying to attract more customers, particularly vaccination centres.